initiated by Senator Young, so you think she would allow active defenses. Yeah, because it looked like they were scattered all around, so they should have had active. Oh, there's Mr. Leon. You up? Oh. Yeah. Got to sit next to Paul, Mike. Sorry.
Could be worse.
Yeah, could be. Oh.
What?
Whoa. Whoa.
That's my feeling.
I don't know. I just went over and, I just talked to Ann, but I'm assuming they're here because Bill is here. Maybe they came along for moral support.
Oh, yeah. You're right.
Well, who else? Who else? I don't see, that's a house principal. I see Ann with the blonde. Okay, and then who's the other one? Jamie? I don't see Jamie. Jamie, I know. Yeah, okay. Okay, you ready, Mike? Mike, you ready?
Yeah, we're on.
Okay. Call the meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, justice for all. Thank you all for coming this evening. Mr. Svoboda is excused. Please join me in a moment of silence for Bailey Rose, a graduate of the district, Samra Osmanovic, a graduate of the district, and Michael Walker, who attended school in the North Syracuse Central School District. Also, Teresa Gaido, a former employee, Maurice Bateman, a former employee, and Mary Gangemi, a former employee of the district. Thank you. First presentation this evening, 2018-19 initial budget draft, Mr. Keegan.
Good evening. So it's that time again, and we're fully immersed in our budget process, and we've got a lot to cover tonight, but I thought maybe it made sense to start with a definition of the initial budget. What is this thing called the initial budget, and why do we open with this every year? The initial budget represents one part business as usual, meaning we know who our staff are and we know what our projections are for student population, and we know where we've spent money in the past, and what we try to do is gather all of the kind of known costs to just operate the school the way we've operated it in the current fiscal year, and just project that forward. We make estimates for some increases based on contractual items like salaries or other items where we can make estimates, energy costs, benefits costs. And we try to, this first part of the budget is business as usual. What would it cost us to do business next year the same way as we're doing it this year? So that's the first piece of the initial budget. The second piece of the initial budget is looking at, we have meetings with our principals and directors, and we talk about, based on the things they know they need to do, class sizes might cause us to need to add staff to meet, class size objectives. We may have changes in our special need population. The things that are specifically known that have to happen. It would be wrong of us to present a budget to the board here tonight and present an initial budget that's business as usual if we knew we had to do some things next year to operate the school. So those are the items that are included. It's to operate the school next year as business as usual, with a few items added on for things we know we need to do in order to meet the needs of our students. So with that, I'm going to overview a couple of items of governor's state aid proposal we saw already. I'm going to talk a little bit about foundation aid, then I'm going to dive right into that initial budget with revenues and expenses and our vehicle bond proposition, and we'll close with fund balance and look again at the vote and election information and budget timeline, as we always do when we talk about the budget. So looking at our revenues at 162.5. Did I hit a button here? Excuse me. My slides got a little out of order, but I'll roll with this. So our revenues are going to be $162.4 million next year, and the importance of this slide is to just focus on the blue and the green slices of the pie. You'll notice that all of our revenues either come from the tax levy or state aid. And I've got some detailed slides to talk about each of those because that's where most of our revenues come from. Looking at the comparison of our revenues year over year, you'll notice that we're expecting an increase in general aid of about $866,000. That, when we say general aid, that's all of our state aid, excluding the building aid. And that's based on the governor's budget proposal. We're going to see a decrease in pilots. People know that, or I think people know that we have these things called payment in lieu of tax agreements that are negotiated between the local municipalities and businesses that come into our area. And when those agreements expire and they're no longer making payments to the district, they go on the tax rolls. So while that's disappointing to lose the pilot revenue, that only means that those businesses are now paying taxes at their full rate. We've made some other minor adjustments here in sales taxes, just based on our experience. Medicaid, we've done a good job of collecting Medicaid revenues, so we've increased that. And again, our overall revenues are $162,445,037. It's an increase of about 2.3%, or about $3.7 million. Most of these items I've covered. I want to touch base on this second bullet point up here under general state aid. We're still hopeful. Remember how the process works. The governor put his budget proposal together and issued that in mid-January. The legislature and the governor are working together over the time between now and the adoption of the budget, passage of the budget, I should say, around April 1st. So we're hoping that we can get additional state aid between now and April 1st with the final budget. And we're particularly hopeful given the fact that we're still significantly underfunded in the area of foundation aid, which I'll cover in a moment. In terms of our building aid, we are always subject to this adjustment that in our building aid due to the fact that when we do all these projects over the years, there's an implied or an assumed interest rate that will finance our projects at. The reality of it is when we actually finance the projects, the interest rates often differ. And the state has this ability to go back and adjust our building aid to reflect the lower rates. Each year the legislature has waived that adjustment, but we always provide for that in our budget, and we'll keep an eye on that as we come down the home stretch for our final budget. And then also we're working with New York State to determine if we've got any building aid adjustments that would impact this year and next year, and we always keep a close eye on that as we have for the last several years, and we'll see where that ends up in this legislative process. And I also want to remind you that with all the Smart Schools money that we've been spending on technology, none of that affects our general fund budget, so it's not included in this presentation. So just to recap the governor's budget proposal. Overall, he's looking at a 3% increase in aid. Most of the aid is really focused on high-need school districts, and the technical definition of a high-need school districts are those with a 50% or higher free and reduced meal rate. North Syracuse's free and reduced meal rate is 36.5%. So we're not technically a high-needs district. While our needs are significant, we're not high needs. And most of the initiatives you see up here by the governor are really focused on higher needs districts. Again, foundation aid. This is the number one item in our budget. If you think about all the aid that we get from New York State, we're projected this year to get $44.9, almost $45 million in foundation aid. The executive budget, the governor's proposal, has us getting $45.7 million, or an increase of about $761,000 in foundation aid. Again, the biggest component. As you noted on our first slide, our total increase is about $822,000. Much of that is the difference is due to fluctuations in our special ed population that's covered in excess costs, our enrollments, which are based on our enrollment-based aids, hardware and technology, software, library, and textbook, and then our transportation aid is another big component. So kind of what are the implications of this governor's budget proposal? Our foundation aid increase of $761,000 is disappointing. Our current funding, our current foundation aid, I'll show you on this next chart, is about $10.8 million less than required under the formula that was developed based on the Campaign for Fiscal Equity lawsuit. So we are looking at a fairly substantial shortfall in our foundation aid yet again, and we're hopeful that that pressure on that will result in the governor and the legislature coming together and giving us more aid between now and April 1st. Right now, our revenues are about $1.1 million short of where we need them to be to cover our initial expenditures, those expenditures I described when I opened up the presentation. And again, we're working with our legislators to better understand our building aid as we get closer to April 1st. So foundation aid, just for those in the audience that are not familiar, there was a lawsuit that called the Campaign for Fiscal Equity lawsuit, where the state was sued because they weren't providing sufficient funds to provide a sound basic public education. And the laws of 2007 reformed the state's method, creating this thing called foundation aid. It was going to be phased in over a 3-year period, and it's never happened. I've shown you this chart before. You can see that in the 7-8 school year, we were $13.8 million underfunded versus that formula. As of today, we're $10.7 million underfunded. So in this roughly 11-year period, we've had $155 million in aid that we haven't received, that theoretically or technically, based on the definition of a sound basic public education, that's the funds we would have needed in order to provide a sound basic education to our students. So we've really been operating in a difficult situation, which we're hopeful will be resolved over the next several years, because the law and the formulas still require that the state pay us this year $56.5 million versus the projected $45.7. Let's move off of the state aid and talk about the local tax levy. As everybody knows, we live under a tax cap, and our tax cap formula looks at a few things, and the central theme of the formula is this thing called the allowable levy growth factor. And as everybody knows, or everybody might remember, that's either 2% or inflation, whichever's less. And inflation this year, as reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the CPI-U was 2.13%. So we are capped at 2%. And that's the central part of this formula. It's going to take our levy of last year and add 2% to it. Then there's adjustments that are made for the pilots, for example. You heard me talk about how our pilots are going down. They were $494,000. They're going to go up to they're going to go down to $220,000 next year. So that needs to be added to the levy, and that will happen naturally as a course of this formula. The other one is this tax levy for capital. And the concept here is that the voters approved certain projects here in the district, and this formula allows us to levy the amount of money that the voters agreed to over the last 20 years or more for capital projects done in the district. And this is basically our mortgage schedule, and it allows us to levy that amount of money in this formula. So at the end of the day, our levy for next year is projected to be, again, this is a preliminary estimate, of $87.7 million. It's about a $2.5 million increase, or 2.94%. Again, that's within the tax cap formula. It's we're staying within the formula, or proposing that we stay within the formula, and that would require a simple majority, one more yes vote than no vote. If we chose to go over this levy, if we chose to increase the levy more than 2.5 million or more than 2.94%, we would have to have a supermajority, meaning 60% of the voters would have to vote yes for the budget, as opposed to a simple majority of one more yes vote than no vote. So what does this levy increase mean to our taxpayers? On a $100,000 home before STAR, it's about a $72 a year increase. Let's switch to our initial expenditures. And again, I want you to focus on these two big pieces of the pie because I think it's so important to remember that we're a people-based business. The most important thing we do is put adults in front of children, and that's what the instructional process is all about. And so I'm proud to say that we spend most of our money on people or services, as in case of BOCES, that support our teaching learning process. Other pieces of the pie here, debt service. Again, that's our total debt service that we have to pay this year. And I want to point out, hopefully I don't lose you here, but that's the total debt service. This is the local share of that debt service. So this is the amount that includes the state aid we're going to receive, the building aid that we're going to receive, and it's included in our expenditures. We also will do another special project. We've been using this $100,000 each of the last several years for security initiatives. And we plan on doing that again next year. And that's pretty much our expenditures at $163.5, and you'll note that number is approximately $1.1 million greater than our revenues. So here's how it breaks out. Our salaries, again, some of this increase, most of this increase is contractual. The balance of the increase is adding personnel, whether it be to support our class sizes or our special needs population or other known needs that we have for supporting our instructional programs. We're also looking at an increase of about $1 million in BOCES programs. And other increases are related to our nominal increase in benefits. We've done a good job of controlling those costs. Debt service is up, but again, that's based on our mortgage, so to speak, our mortgage payments that are due, and our aid is up, as well to support that. Our total budget is for expenditures is $163.5 million, or about $4.8 million increase, or 3.08% increase over last year. And again, we're proposing in this initial budget, as we often do, unfortunately, is a deficit, and we're hopeful that we'll get more revenues as the state aid picture clarifies as we get closer to April 1st. A couple things that I've already mentioned. We're doing a good job working. Yeah.
Does that deficit include?
Great. That's a great question. So let's go back to that. So we're assuming in our revenues, we're assuming that we use about the same amount of fund balance that we did this year. So we used $2.7 million, a little over $2.7 million in the 17-18 year, and we're proposing that we're going to use the $2.7 million to balance the budget again in the 18-19 school year. So that's taking money out of our savings account, so to speak, our fund balance, to make that work. Good question, Mike. Thank you. So hitting a couple of the key expenditure items. In benefits, we're doing a good job managing those expenses, working very closely with our Health Oversight Committee and our employees who have made concessions over the years that have certainly paid off in lower health care costs, or I should say lower increases than we'd otherwise expect. Our TRS and our ERS, those are our teachers' retirement system and our employee retirement system. Those rates are based on rates that were given to the district. The TRS is an estimate, but it's pretty firm at this point. ERS is a solid number, and that's locked in at 15.8%. Salaries based on our contracts that we've settled. Diesel fuel prices, you may have seen, have increased quite a bit over the past year. We don't panic over that because we get transportation aid, and we always look at our transportation costs net of aid. Our aid rate is about 77%. So, but we do watch our fuel costs as well as our energy costs. We purchase our natural gas and our electric utilities through NYSMIC, New York State Energy Consortium, Municipal Energy Consortium, and we are currently coming to the end of our 3-year contract and entering into a new contract. And so as we have more information about that, I'll incorporate that into the budget. We continue to evaluate opportunities to control costs with BOCES and have consistently increased our use of BOCES services to meet the needs of students and maximize BOCES aid. Looking at our expenditure per pupil, I want to pause here for a minute. I've taken a little bit of a different approach this year than I have in the past. Normally what I do is I look at the total expenditures that a district spends on its on everything, and I divide that out, or I actually extract that information in the form of expenditures per pupil. What's up here in front of us is all 23 component school districts for the OCM BOCES, Onondaga, Cortland, Madison County BOCES, and this year I pulled out of Forecast 5. That's a database we use. Just the spending for general fund and special aid. So I'm ignoring things like food service and capital projects and other expenditures that might not directly, that might be a little less stable. And so we're looking at North Syracuse being the 21st district in our BOCES. So still a relatively low spending in our area. And out of 688 districts in the state, we're ranked 655th. So we spend less per pupil than most people in our BOCES and most people in the state. Vehicle bonding proposition. So I have a little bit of a story to tell here, so I'll do the best I can. We normally purchase buses every year. We buy 10 65-passenger buses every year, and usually 2 special needs buses. Our goals are to keep the average age of our fleet, or I should say the oldest buses. We really don't want to have buses that are over 10 years old on the road. Truth be told, we do have some, but we're doing the best we can to keep our fleet operationally efficient as well as reasonable age. We purchased some vehicles in 2012 that that are out of their warranty. They had a 5-year warranty on their engines and other key mechanical components. And just, candidly, they've been a dog for us. They've been a mechanical nightmare. Now they're off warranty, and we're spending money like crazy on them. And so what we've negotiated with the manufacturer to take those 2012s in as a trade-in and give us a favorable trade-in value. And as a result of that, we're going to buy 12 65-passenger buses this year instead of 10. It'll offset a little bit the fact that we're trading a more recent model year by going from 10 to 12, and we're going to still do our 2 special needs buses. We're also going to purchase a delivery truck. Last year we did a bucket loader, and we always try to pick up another support vehicle. The total cost of these 15 vehicles is $1.4 million, almost 1.5. It's actually less money than we spent last year. Because of that trade-in on those 2012 buses. Tax impact after transportation aid is approximately $1.82 per year for a house assessed at $100,000 before STAR, but after transportation aid. And that also is less than it was last year when we did 10 65-passenger buses. So we're making the best of a bad situation with those 2012s, but we think we're doing the right thing in order to, again, maintain a reliable and cost-effective fleet. Projected fund balance. You've seen these slides already. So, Mike, this goes back to your question. We're planning on spending $2.7 million. We haven't closed the year yet, so we don't really know at this point what our revenue variance is going to be, positive or negative, or our expenditure variance. But I will say this. As you know, we put an expenditure freeze in place. I'm reasonably confident that our expenditures will come in under budget, and that will contribute to our fund balance. But right now we're looking at an unassigned fund balance projection as of June 30th of about $3.6 million, or about 2.29%. That's low. We were up at 3.99 at the beginning of the year. I think that this is going to come down to how does the year shake out in terms of revenues and expenditures, and how much additional aid we get between now and April 1st. Every dollar of aid will make this situation better. No, I agree with you. In terms of our reserves, not much change in our reserves. Just so everybody's aware, this capital reserve, we've dedicated most of this toward the Bear Road project. So that'll be, when that project is complete, that reserve will be depleted. But there's not much of a change in reserves other than very nominal interest income. In summary, the governor's proposal is inadequate. We need more foundation aid paid to the district. It's really hurting us. Our preliminary tax levy is an increase of 2.94%. It's at the tax cap. Will require a simple majority, one more yes vote than no vote. And if we do that, taxpayers will receive their rebate checks. The initial budget includes expenditures of $163.5, which increased by about 4.8, almost 4.9 million, or about 3.08 percent. Our initial budget revenues are only 162.4, or an increase of about 3.7 million, or about 2.37%. There's where our $1.14 million deficit comes in. And we're still working on a number of key items with the budget, and we hope to have more for you next week in terms of some of the details behind this as it relates to initiatives that we're looking at that are part of the initial budget. Vote and election, our vote is on May 15th. We'll have our public information meeting 2 weeks before that. We're going to continue to do the registration efforts that we've been doing every year leading up to the vote to encourage people to get out and vote. And that's next week. We'll have a more detailed look at the initial budget with the board. Then we'll have a 2-week break, and we'll come back and the board will have a look at the final tax cap. We'll give you an update on the budget. Hopefully we'll get you to approve the bus bond proposition and the notice of budget hearing and election. And that's pretty much the presentation. Any questions or comments?
I have a question.
Sure.
So your projection is 2.37. What was it last year? The budget increase? Do you remember?
Oh, yes. Last year, you mean 2.94, the increase, or the?
The 2.37% increase for this
Oh,
year.
in terms of spending.
Right.
Okay, in terms of revenue increase.
So this is a projection, and last year when we approved the budget, did it shake out after we got all our aid?
No, actually, what happened last year was and again, another great question, which was really perplexing to me. When we did our expenditures last year, this number went up about $1.4 million. They've only given us $761,000 increase this year. So last year, we got very little when the budget was finalized. The budget was almost 2 weeks late, and we got like $80,000 more. We're hopeful this year, particularly given the fact that it didn't give us much of an increase in foundation aid, and it's an election year, that we see a bump in that foundation aid. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's our biggest. If you think about our revenues, this foundation aid is our biggest component of state aid, and a giant component in terms of revenues.
Well, my point was just sometimes you give the projections, but when people actually get their tax bill, it turns out it's not as much.
Okay, yeah. So let's hone in on that for a second. I'm going to do a slide. I was holding off on that information, but so let's just talk about that a little bit. The point that Mary's making, and bear with me 1 second. So when we did right now we're projecting a 2.94% tax levy increase. Last year we projected over a 3% increase. The reality of it is our taxpayers never experienced that high an increase because there's changes in the assessed values. We're working on last year's assessment rolls. So by the time in August when the new assessment rolls come through, what ends up happening is in our district we're always adding houses and there's new developments going on. That tax levy is spread out over a bigger tax base and everybody experiences a lower tax rate increase. And I'm working on a little chart that I thought as we got closer to the final budget that would kind of show the last several years and comparing what we said we were going to increase versus what people experience. So I'll make sure I have that for you.
Thank you. I'd be interested in seeing that.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you, Don.
All right, thank you.
Oops. Okay. Now we have a CNS High School Student Ranking Survey presentation. Mr. Leclerc and Ms. Heffron will present that. There they are.
Good evening, everyone. You guys hear me okay? Okay. All right. So, thank you for having us. So, we're here for a purpose of proposing a change that we would like to see at the high school. As you know, for the past 2 years, the district has devoted some time at looking at our grading practices, K through 12. From there, we've branched off into subcommittees, and we have a committee at the secondary level. And our change that we feel would be with eliminating ranks would enhance the district mission in regards to inspiring all students to reach their individual potential and productive citizens. Not only that, we feel that eliminating rank would assist in students becoming college and career ready. And with that, we have some guided questions. These are some questions that we've asked ourselves, we've grappled with in our committee meetings. Does our current system that we have now inspire our students to reach their full individual potential? Not only that, some of the questions, the guided questions we also have is why do we continue to rank? What is its purpose? Some of the things we've come up with are twofold. Sometimes we get stuck in the idea of this is what we've always done, so we're going to continue to do it. And I want to try to encourage us to kind of break that mindset. And the other thing I think is something that we've always done because we felt that it's what's needed for students to get into a college. Where in fact, we have talked to many college admissions throughout the 14 top colleges that we send our students to. And I'll let Mrs. Heffron go into what we found. And we've shared that document with you, but we'll share with the audience as well.
Well, you have the document of the 14 colleges, but I also wanted to let you know that I am the vice president of the directors of counseling for Onondaga County. And within our meetings, we have monthly meetings, and I surveyed the Onondaga County districts. And I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that more and more schools, even in our county, are going to not ranking. There are some schools that are already there and have already put this in place many, many years ago. Some are more recent. And then there's some that are at this same point, like we are, going to our boards of education and starting the communication piece. And then there's others that are starting the talks. So some of the schools that are not ranking and haven't been for years would be FM. They haven't ranked for at least 20 years. Skaneateles just went to not ranking 2 school years ago. And then also Marcellus, Cazenovia, CBA, Bishop Ludden. Another district that is in the same process as we are this school year, they've already sent their proposal to their Board of Ed, is Liverpool. And then other schools that are in talks are Tully, ESM, and West Jenny are all in talks about not ranking. Within the colleges that you have, oh, actually, that's another. So the colleges that we sent, yeah, that'd be great. Our top colleges, top 2 are Lemoyne and Oswego. Both of them stated that ranking does not matter. They don't look at it. The number one thing to colleges are the students' transcripts. So they're looking at the courses the student took, did they challenge themselves, and how well did they do in those classes. Then the next thing they look at are activities. What else is the student involved in? Do they just get up in the morning, go to school, go home, do homework, go to bed, and then do that all over again the next morning, and they don't enrich themselves with other activities? That's the second most important thing. Then it's SATs and ACT scores, and then we go on to their essay and letters recommendation. So as you look through that document, all these schools said that ranking is no longer important. They look at everything else in place of that. Along with our top 14 schools we send our students to, we also called some Ivy League schools, because although the Ivy League schools do not end up being, a main, where our students mainly go compared to Lemoyne and Oswego and SU, we do have some students that apply there, and we definitely would not want to hurt any students. So we wanted to make sure we were doing our due diligence and check all the options. And, you can see that Brown, NYU, Cornell, Harvard, all three of them said they do not look at ranking. So, Paul?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Brown stuck out at me when I was reading this the other day. Is that, what do they really say there? We don't look at ranking, but we want to look at a distribution of the GPA and where the student falls within the class.
Yes, that
Which
is their GPA. Well, that's their GPA. So on our school profile, every year I put together a school profile, which is basically a whole bunch of information of our just graduated senior class. And within that profile, I do put together a table of, okay, we have this number of many students that had GPAs between 97 and 100. This many students that had GPAs between 95 and 96.9. So I break that down in a table, so then at least they can have an idea. So some schools did say that as long as we have that distribution on our profile, that's all they need.
Yeah, and I'm a fan of not ranking, by the way. I don't want to sound like I'm in trouble.
Oh, no.
But I was concerned with that, and essentially it sounds like we'd still be keeping, I'll just say, a distribution of GPA and where, well, like Geneseo doesn't look at it. It's the last thing they look at it, but obviously they're saying they're looking at it, and they want students in the top 10% of it.
Right.
Is that how am I reading that correctly?
With
I'm just looking at
Geneseo,
Geneseo, yeah, which I'm sure we send a number of.
yes. Well, you can, when you look at, take CNS with a graduating class of 706, and then you look at maybe Altmar Parish Williamstown, where my husband is, and they have a graduating class of 87. So the top 10% is very different when you're looking at that. So that's why a lot of schools, if it's on the transcript and it's available, they will look at it. But if it's not available, it doesn't matter. They look at everything else as a bigger picture. So they look more at the whole student than just at the numbers.
So with that, too, the reason is because every school weights and rank in differently. So they all have their own formula. So when they get all these transcripts in during admission time, they have that goes to the wayside. So they're now looking at other things. So, but, with that, too, part of the other reason was, some of the things we didn't discuss yet is how does this impact the culture amongst the student body? And the pressure that adds to these students is overwhelming to some of them. And that's a leading factor as well in looking at it. And not only that, this is a time for them to explore their interests. So that way when they do go, if they do go to a college, not a year from their freshman year, they're not changing their majors. As we know, a high percentage of students do that, and that puts them in the hole financially with loans, and maybe even a year behind. So we want them to explore their interests. And that's why we had the students take a survey in the beginning of February, okay, when the survey was 9 through 12, and it was premised around the idea of how, when you come to select your classes, what goes into the decision making. And this is a data point that we said. Why, we asked them, when making your schedule, you choose your class based on the impact of GPA. And as you can see, it's very important to the students. So instead of taking classes that they may be interested in, that maybe will lead them to a career path or a college major, they're taking classes just basically that will impact their rank. And then to go off of what Mrs. Heffron said, another data point we wanted to show you in the survey was that idea of what are kids doing outside of the school day? Are they involved in other things that maybe will help them stand out in the admissions process, whether it's joining a club, get a part-time job, or volunteering in the community? And we posed the question as if, imagine if you lived in a system where maybe you didn't have grades, pass, fail, would you be more apt to get involved outside of the day? To us, this was very telling that they would.
We see far too often where we have seniors that's all they do is they do school, and that's what they feel their job is. But what colleges are looking for and what colleges are telling us is they're looking for students to have that experience outside of school. They're looking for them to either have work experience or just getting them out there in the community. You know, what are they doing to help the community that they live in? You know, by volunteering or by working or doing, you know, playing a sports or being involved in clubs and drama and music. So they want students that are doing something other than just studying, that there's more to life than just studying. They want those enriched students that are more well-rounded. So with the ranking, we're finding that students are just pigeonholing themselves into, let's take this class, that class, so then I can have a higher GPA than this other one, because they are deeming that as important, and in some ways it could be, but it's not getting them where they need to be successful in the future when we're looking at someone being a good citizen and giving back to their community, you know, now and later when they're older.
So to be clear, we'll still continue, if you were to accept this change, we would still continue to weight and have weighted and unweighted on the transcript, you know, and we would still have GPAs. You know, I talked to a mom today, she's a freshman mother, and she was concerned, and I answered some of her questions. Yeah, we would still have GPAs. You still have to have that. But, so, if you were to accept the proposal that we have, we wouldn't make a cold cut change for next year. We would phase it in, and that would be with the freshman class next year, the class of 2022. And with that, obviously, we would have to educate the students and the parents with that. Look at having like a session where parents could come in, hear our presentation, and answer any questions that they may have on that. Then we would look at a way that we, as the committee, we would look at how can we honor more seniors at graduation, looking at a criterion-based recognition system, kind of going at the model of the college level, the cum laude system, where, and with that, we've looked at our rankings for this year, this senior class. If we were to have that system in place, we could honor 335 seniors instead of just the top 10. And these are students that have a good GPA and have shown academic achievement throughout the 4 years. And then with that, the change that I think would be new is that we wouldn't have a valedictorian, salutatorian. We would look at a way that we would have a class speaker. We would then come back and report to you on what that looks like and what we would do and how we would determine the class speaker.
I saw in this presentation is it seems that a lot of the schools are looking for the quality of our do away with the ranking system. We need some method or process to ensure we keep the quality or improving the quality of our classes, you know, and some budget cuts we keep suffering doesn't help.
You're
Absolutely.
totally correct.
That becomes
agree
a
with that.
focus for us. And
You know, what one thing is that colleges tell us about our program over some other districts is that we have been able to, and I think that it became very important that we tried to keep as many electives as possible throughout that whole horrible last 10 years when we were going through all those cuts. We have more electives than anybody else that I know, and that really does enrich our students. But then thinking further, if students were actually taking courses toward what their interests are or possible interests are instead of to one-up somebody else, what would be the outcome of that? We'd have more students taking courses that are interesting and are electives, and it would be amazing, like what they can learn from those other courses.
So, in the end, should we have graduation requirements for community service? And should there be more opportunities if that's what the colleges are looking for?
We already do. Our seniors have to complete 10 community service hours.
National Honor Society.
Plus National Honor Society also has community service hours.
Okay.
It would be wonderful if there could be more, but then you also need to look at the balance within the students' activities and, school life and home life also. So some schools have gone to 20 volunteer hours, but you do have to look at the balance and how do families make that happen if they're involved in other things on top of it.
And the state has talked about that too, making
Yeah.
that a requirement over 4 years, a certain many of hours that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Comments from the audience. Bill Clary, School Safety and Budget. Know the 3-minute rule, Phil, and Connie will remind you when you get there. So.
Oh, she will. So I'll be reading
Yeah,
instead
okay.
of just going,
There you go.
instead of winging it. Hi, everybody. My name is Phil Cleary. I'm a district graduate, resident, taxpayer, and classroom teacher. I'm here tonight to talk about violence in schools and school security. As you all know, there's a lot of concern, fear, and anger on this issue nationwide. Parents, teachers, students, and community members are searching far and wide for answers. But, as they say, all politics are local. As a classroom teacher, I worry about the safety of my students and my colleagues. As you know, each year we have lockdown drills. Each time as I turn my key, locking it from the inside, I can't help but think, and I really have to think, is this just a drill? Each time, like my colleagues throughout the district, I gather my students in a corner with me between them and the door. I'm not telling you this because I'm special. I'm not. There are over 800 staff members in our schools doing exactly the same thing. But the question needs to be asked here and now. Are we doing all we can and should be doing? And as in all things, it comes down to money. We eliminated our director of security. Currently, we have fewer SROs at our secondary schools and none at our elementary schools. Our youngest students are protected by a glass door and our hardworking school secretaries who have many other duties. At Main Street, where I work, the doors are unlocked 4 times a day for comings and goings of parents and students. And we're guarded by teaching assistants armed with a clipboard. Now, I'm not here to lay blame. I'm just pointing out that we can and should and must do better. And as I mentioned at our last Board of Education meeting, Washington, D.C. is not going to save us. Albany is not going to save us. If we want to ensure the best for our students, we must do it ourselves by raising taxes. I'll leave you tonight with my repeated request to raise my taxes, and I'll be clear, over the tax cap. And my suggestion to you, our elected officials, is to talk about these matters in this forum where the public can see and hear you. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Christina Lensowitz on school counseling needs. Christine? Yeah, once again, 3 minutes, Christine.
After 18 years at the secondary level, last spring I made a decision to move to the elementary school counseling spot that opened. I love working at this level. The students are adorable. It's a blessing for me to spend time with them. There's lots of happiness and smiles at the elementary schools. I also applaud the Board of Ed and the district for making social-emotional learning a priority in our Vision 2020. Truly, it's the foundation all children need to become healthy, happy, well-adjusted, educated citizens, and the research has shown early intervention is critical. Let's face it, it's a different world from when I grew up. Family dynamics are changing. Over 50% of marriages end in divorce, and most nuclear families have 2 working parents, which creates stress in even the most organized households. The temptations offered by and the accessibility of information through the internet and all types of media have created its own set of societal problems. TV screen time takes up a majority of our children's time when they're not in school, which is resulting in poor social and communication skills even at times a disconnect from reality. With world news on TV every moment, many of our youngest students are exposed to the horrors of the world on a regular basis. And of course, this makes them feel frightened and confused, so we cannot be surprised that anxiety and fear are epidemic. Parenting has changed. We are faced with the reality that although socializing the children has always been the primary task of the family, this unfortunately is not happening often enough. And in the words of Donna Ryder, when parents fail, we are next in line to step in. I have to say I've found the elementary teachers to be the most hard-working, dedicated, lovely group of people I've ever met. Such commitment is inspiring. Really, they're amazing. But the teachers can't take on the additional task of the social-emotional curriculum all by themselves. They need support. School counselors and social workers are that support. Unfortunately, right now we're spread too thin to be of much help. Working in 2 or 3 buildings each week means most of our time is spent on a crisis counseling or a very small minority of students instead of the whole building. Typically, elementary school counselors provide classroom lessons at all grade levels to support the teachers, but we haven't been fully staffed to be able to do that often enough. If you look at our neighboring districts, you'll see that they do staff a full-time counselor in each elementary building. We need to do that as well, now more than ever. If we lay a solid foundation early on, we're hoping to see the impact at the higher levels soon. I understand there's a lot of challenges to create a budget that serves our children and our community best. I'm also sure you're all as heartbroken as I am to witness the result of emotionally damaged youth committing unspeakable acts. We cannot afford to take the chance of missing anyone. Right now, we need help. And to be honest, we need more counselors and social workers at every grade level. But this year we're asking you please add at least 2 more school counselors or social workers at the elementary level so we can support the teachers with the social emotional learning we know is essential in our mission to educate our children and build a solid emotional foundation for all of them.
Thank you, Christine. Next item, board committee reports. Policy, Mary? Got some on here tonight.
Yeah, we do. So we had our policy committee meeting February 12th, I believe, and we do have some policies on the agenda tonight. I think there's 4 policies. One is just readoption, and there's 3, I think, that are amend and readopt. And the next meeting is going to be March 13th.
Legislative, Paul?
And we have not had a meeting since the last meeting of this board. And I have to report is we have a legislative committee meeting on the 21st March.
Aaron, you went to that workshop, sent us a nice report afterward of everything that was there. Yeah. I'm glad you went. I again appreciated that report back. So, thank you. Anybody else with anything, board committee? Okay, superintendent's comments.
So yes, I see we have a lot of students here tonight. That's great, and I hope you're all well rested after your week off. I just want to mention.
Week off? You get a week off?
I said the students are well rested.
Oh, I didn't get one on. No.
We didn't either. I do want to congratulate some of our athletic teams because it's that time again where our season is coming to an end. Hard to believe, but winter season is about wrapping up. So congratulations to the Class AA champions for cheerleading once again. Cicero North Syracuse will compete on March 3rd, this coming weekend at SRC Arena, and we wish them well in the state championship. Girls basketball, congratulations to them. They will compete, I believe, Friday evening playing at the Dome for the section championship game. That is pretty awesome. Congrats to several individuals who made states for indoor track. Jeremiah Willis, Joe Williams, Mia Pestel, Liliana Klemansky, Nate Poirier, and David Ware. Bowling. New York State's top high school bowlers gathered at the On Center. They will be gathering next month at the On Center for the state championship tournament, and we have a bowling star, Tim Clunan, that will be in that competition, and we wish him well. I also want to mention, we talk about athletics, and yes, being on the court and on the field is one thing, but we are really looking to well-round the experience for our athletic student leaders. And Narski, with the help of Mr. Leclerc, has created a captain's club, and they've done some great community service. And they had a wonderful opportunity last week to visit Chick-fil-A and not only sample, I haven't been there yet, but not only sample what I hear is good food. And they helped out the new servers and cooks and so forth they were kind of the guinea pigs, I believe. But most importantly, the owner of Chick-fil-A did meet with them, Jimmer Stikowski, I don't know if I'm saying his name. He met with them to talk about leadership and to kind of give them an inspiring talk about being leaders. So we are happy for that experience for them. And lots of times we focus on our varsity athletes because that's what the kids all aspire to play and to become varsity athletes. But I do want to mention congratulations to the CNS JV girls basketball team. They were undefeated, 20 to nothing this season. They won. Congratulations to them. Just want to mention the Wall of Distinction will be happening, and our alumni will be honored Friday evening at the high school.
I want to mention the breakfast. What breakfast? Oh, legislative breakfast.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Just
go
one
ahead.
more thing.
Forgot about it.
On February 10th, the Central New York School Boards Association held its annual legislative breakfast at our BOCES on 7th North Street. So thank you to all of the board members and administrators that were able to attend. It's always nice to see North Syracuse have a high amount of support at those meetings, along with Mr. Crabtree, our school district BOCES representative. So had a good conversation with our local assemblymen and state senators, and we continue to push with them to help get the proper funding our schools need.
Speaking of Mr. Crabtree, he brought tonight specific information on North Syracuse School District at BOCES. So a lot of good information there, and it shows on the front page very succinctly the value that we get out of BOCES and BOCES as a district. So thank you. Bob serves on that board, and thank you for doing that. Thank you for bringing this to us, sir. Thank you. Routine action items. A, consideration of approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of the Board of Ed on February 5. B, consideration of the classification and school placement of disabled students certified by the District Committee on Special Education. C, consideration of classification and placement of preschool disabled students certified by the District Committee on Preschool Special Education. D, consideration of classification and placement of students in home instruction programs as recommended by the Home Instruction Review Committee. Acknowledgement of business office reports for December 17, and a consideration of a contract award, which I will read. This is a contract for the transportation fueling station, and the recommended action is to award the contract to LaValle Brothers Construction in the amount of $993,777 as the lowest responsible bidder meeting the specifications. I will entertain a motion to approve 5A through F as a group. Mr. Harrington, Mr. Leone, all in favor. 6, discussion action items. Acknowledgement of a gift. The KWS Bear Road Elementary. Oh, I lost it. Stick with me, folks. The KWS Bear Road Elementary School Parent-Teacher Organization donated to the school district $1,400 for KWS Bear Road Elementary to purchase a Chromebook cart, boothwalk system, and we have the surplus of non-marketable goods as per the attachment. I will entertain a motion for A and B together. Mr. Fafalia, Ms. Owens, all in favor? We have the 4 policies that Mary mentioned, 4321, 5311, 8101, and 4321.9. Mary, for a motion to approve as a group. Second, Mr. Harrington, all in favor? And retirements. Lou Colunio, who's a custodian at Allen Road Elementary School, retires with 20 years of service. And Patty Marlowe, account clerk in the business office, is going to retire with 30 years. So we certainly wish both of them a long and happy and healthy retirement. Instructional personnel, 7A. Are there any questions on any of those items in instructional personnel? 7B, support staff. First, I'll entertain a motion to approve 7A and B together. Ms. Owens, Mr. Maurizio. All in favor? Motion for executive session. Motion to move to executive session for the purpose of receiving an update on negotiations with the North Syracuse Education Association and the Transportation Bargaining Units, to receive an update on one legal matter relative to potential litigation, and to review the employment history of 3 individuals with no action to follow. Motion for executive session. Ms. McDonald and Mr. Leone, all in favor? Go to executive session. All of you who need your form signed, seniors, come on forward.